Okay, I guess we could start this interview. And I am looking forward to hearing his story again because it's amazing. And we'll start with your name. What is your full name?
Russell Vaudrey,
Okay. When and where were you born?
Guinea, Wyoming, July 10th, 1922.
Wow, that's amazing. And how old are you?
Let's see, I'm 101. I'll be 102 in July.
Amazing. Yeah, that's such a blessing that you've lived so long. You've seen so much. What was your full rank? At what branch of the armed forces did you serve in?
That time it was called the Army Air Corps, and my rank was Master Sergeant.
Okay. When you were younger, do you remember listening to fireside chats?
Well, not really. My dad liked to listen to the radio, but mostly he liked to listen to the comics and the news.
Do you recall hearing what was happening in Europe concerning the Nazi regime or the Japanese invading China?
Well, I remembered a little bit, but it didn't affect me at that time anyway.
Where were you when you found out about Pearl Harbor?
I was in college and four of us were playing cards.
And when you were in college, what were you studying?
Engineering.
And the specific area of engineering, was there a specific area?
Well, not at that time because it was just my second year.
Now, did you listen to the FDR Declaration of War address?
Yes, I did.
What did you think about that?
Well, I wasn't very fond of going to war, but we didn't have any choice.
It was probably like very shocking, like it made you nervous. I think it made a lot of people unsettled.
Well, it did, we didn't know what was coming up or what we were going to be doing.
Right. There's a lot of uncertainty at that time. What do you recall about the surge of patriotism the U.S. saw in the days following Pearl Harbor?
Well, there was a lot of young people that enlisted into the various services as we were in war.
Yeah. And for you, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted October 6th, 19. I'm not sure, 44, I believe.
Now, how old were you when you enlisted?
20.
20 years old. Yeah. What was the difference? You had mentioned this, and so has another veteran. What was the difference between the men that enlisted versus the men who were drafted?
Some of them wanted to be part of it right away, and some of them probably didn't want to be part of it for a while.
Now, you were also saying, too, that for those that were enlisted, you got to choose which branch you went into.
Yes, if you enlisted, you could join the branch. Otherwise, if you were drafted, you went wherever they needed you.
Yeah. I kind of think that's fair. I think that it shows because you enlisted, you had the motivation to serve your country, and I think that it's a fair thing that they did. You had mentioned before, I do believe, but what branch of the armed forces did you choose to go into?
The Army Air Corps, that's what it was called then.
Right. And this goes into the next question, that you were talking about the Army Air Corps first being called that. And when I was starting to do these interviews, I noticed that too. And I noticed the change in the name. It went from the Army Air Corps to the Air Force. What year did you say that that name changed?
1947.
Yes.
Before we were under Army regulations, and then it became its own entity in 1947.
Mhm. You know, I like how they did that fairly quickly, as they found out that there really is a difference between the people that are in the Army and handling a lot of the land activities, and then the Air Force, which is now the Air Force, that they made that a separate entity, a separate branch. I think that was really good that they did that. Unlike most new military soldiers, you did not have to go through basic training. Why didn't you go through basic training?
Well, I'd been working as an aircraft mechanic and going to school, and they needed mechanics, people with some experience, so they sent me to the Marana Air Base near Tucson, Arizona.
Could you say the name of that air base again?
Miranda,
Miranda. Mm,
Marana, I believe.
nice. Now, this base was a training base for the pilots, right?
Yes, for for pilots, we trained. Well, we took care of the airplanes. Actually, we had nothing to do with their training. Uh, they trained first in what they call the BT-13 airplane, basic trainer. And from there, they went to what they call the AT-6 plane, which was the advanced trainer.
And what was your job title that you did have?
I'm not exactly sure what the title was, but I was in charge of 5 training planes.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned the names of the planes. Did you work on both types of planes?
Yes,
Mhm. How many squadrons did this base have?
well, this particular squadron had 4, I guess you'd say, squadrons of 12 planes each.
12 planes each. That was 12 planes in each squadron?
Yes, there was 4 squadrons and 400. So I
Wow.
belonged in the 90th Bomb Group 400 Squadron. So there was 4 squadrons of 12 planes each.
So, 4 squadrons with 12 planes each.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you know about how many soldiers were working in each squadron? Just like a guess.
Well, we worked, you might say 2 shifts, a day shift, and then they flew at night for night training.
Hmm. That's interesting. And I guess you kind of need that. You need the night training to know how to navigate at night as well as the day. That's good that they did that. Um, you said that at the time the airbase did not have a runway or a tarmac. Please describe to us what the airfield looked like.
Well, it was blacktop for a square mile, and then they just marked the landing uh, areas with paint. And I can't remember how many, but I think about 4.
That's
Uh,
I think that's pretty neat. You know, they started off the way they did and how much they've evolved since that time frame. I noticed they had different names for the different planes. Do you remember like names they gave the planes? Nicknames. The nicknames that they might have given some of the planes. Do you know of any of those that had nicknames?
Well, at that time, they didn't do that. It was when I went overseas in the B-24s, the squadrons had their names painted on the nose of the B-24 Liberator bomber.
You mentioned too that at one time when you were flying in the C-47 that a pilot had never flown before. What happened to you all on that flight?
Well, he started down the runway, and to reverse a little bit, the B-24 to kind of straighten them up on the runways, which they had two tails, and they'd kind of whip the tails around and get straightened out. Well, this guy had never flown the C-47, and he was trying to get straightened up, and he started whipping that tail around. He knew he was in trouble, so he tried to pull it off of the runway, and we didn't have enough airspeed, so we crashed into the palm trees and stuff, and there was 6 of us, and we thought we'd all gotten out of the airplane, but there was one missing, and that was the co-pilot. So another fellow and myself went back in, kind of slapped him around so he kind of was awake, and pushed him up through the hatch above between the pilot and co-pilot, and finally got him out. And of course he was still dazed, kind of staggered around, and we hung on each side of him to get away from the plane, which is on fire, and probably 100 feet or so away, the plane blew up.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. But thankfully, other than that one person, no other people were hurt from that, right?
Well, there was none of us hurt.
That's good. Let's see, as we talk about the positions of those people, we'll look at those planes so that people can see where you guys were sitting in those planes, but we'll get to that in just a few minutes. You mentioned that you also went overseas and you had some work that they sent you to do there. Where were you sent to in the Pacific?
I was sent to New Guinea. Well, I was sent there to the place, and then from there they assigned you to the various areas. From that area, I was sent to Bayok Island, which was off the coast of about between New Guinea and the Philippines.
Yes. So you have become a part of the Pacific Theater of Operation. With World War II, it's divided up into different, they called it theaters of operation. So that was like a different areas where they helped during the war. So Pacific Theater of Operation was a part of, and the abbreviation for that is PTO. So that's what, when we were talking the other day, that's what that is that you were a part of.
Yeah.
Now, when you had gotten over there, what group, what unit did you become a part of?
The 90th Bomb Group 400 Squadron.
Yes. And you have a book now that you just got not too long ago, you said, that has the Jolly Rogers on it.
Yeah.
Could you hold it up a little bit more? Look at that. The Jolly Rogers 90th Bombardment Group. That is pretty cool. From 1943 or 1942 to 1944. That's really cool. I like that. And how does that make you feel to be able to have a book to be able to look at?
Well, I just received the book a few days ago, and I really haven't taken the time to look at it, but it's pretty cool that we have something like that to
To remember.
yeah.
It's written down, you know, and again, that's part of this project because some of these little stories that are so big, you know, some of them are not written down. But Chuck also has a someone that had written a story about one of his friends that was in a battle, and it was not too far from where Chuck was, and his friend was mentioned in that book because he survived that battle, and
Well,
so that's pretty cool. Now, each squadron, this is something I looked up, also had a symbol to represent their squadron on the plane. What was the symbol that represented the 400 squadron? Do you know that?
the symbol was the skull and crossbones.
Mm-hmm. And that is on the plane, isn't it? If you want to hold that up. And the name that they had, because they had patches that went with it as well. The name that they had for that represented the skull was the Black Pirates. So that was the symbol that represented the skull, was you guys were the Black Pirates.
No, right. Well, we were called the Jolly Rogers, and but we're known as the Black Pirates, is correct.
Yeah. You said you were stationed in New Guinea, but that you weren't there for very long. How long were you stationed there? And when they
Well,
sent you, that was where they sent you to the Bayok Islands.
yeah, I was sent to Hollandia, New Guinea, and that's a town right on the border between Dutch New Guinea and British New Guinea. At that time, they owned those or were in control of them, and this was a area where they assigned you to various units, and I ended up at the 90th Bomb Group 400 Squadron. Now, from there, I was sent to Bayok Island, Biack.
Yes. And the Bayok, yeah, it is Bay. Okay. The Bayok Islands. I looked it up. And that was a part of the Philippines. When you were there, what did you do?
I was a mechanic, and I volunteered for combat flight service, they called it. They had put a bulletin on the bulletin board asking any ground man if he wanted to fly. So what they were really doing is get some ground men to fly, but we didn't have any crew. So we were actually substitutes as a tail gunner, side gunner, or whatever, wherever we were needed.
Now, this is where, if you could hold up the plane and show us some of the positions of the gunners on the plane, and what were the names of their position?
I'm gonna hold it off the base. Where would the side gunners be?
You can see
Hold
those.
it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Actually, there's, if you move your finger, see, there's
Better.
right there.
And then what were the other ones?
Side gunner, and then
These are two side gunners, had a tail gunner,
mhm.
had a nose gunner, and the engineer was the top gunner when.
And so the pilot and the top gunner, they were on the top, and the bombardier was in the front.
Yes, bombardier, and then also for the pilot was a navigator.
What did the flight gunner do?
Well, he was the flight engineer, and actually the mechanic if it was needed on the flights, and he sat right behind the pilots on one side, the navigator sat behind the pilots on the other side. And then we also we had a radio man, because as you changed certain areas, the radio man had to take out a big box, put in another one to keep communications going.
The radio man is someone that is, I mean, everybody's important in their job, but the radio man was also, like, you had ground radio men that helped in communications out on the battlefield, but you also, like for you, you had the radio man helping you, like you said, when situations changed or anything new was coming, that radio man was your communication.
Right, that as we went into different areas, we were flying along, the communication apparently stopped, and he'd take that unit out and put in another one into the radio. I really don't understand it. That's what he did.
Yeah, yeah. He was doing his job and you were doing your job. What were the names of the guns that were used by the planes?
There were 50 twin 50 caliber machine guns.
You mentioned that the B-24 Liberator was the plane that you flew in for these missions.
Yes.
And at that time, that was the biggest plane that there was. You told me that, right?
Yeah, they were 4-engine bomber.
Mm-hmm. And it had, okay, I'm sorry.
In the Europe area, they used mostly what they call B-17s, but the B-24 had a longer range and could fly further than the B-24. So that's the reason we had it, because everything is generally over water.
Right, because you were in the Pacific Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean that we have. So
Yeah,
you had a lot of water.
right.
When you were shooting, were you shooting at the planes that were coming at you, or were you shooting at the ground?
Oh no, we were shooting at the enemy. They were flying their Japanese Zero fighter planes, and we also had fighter planes protecting us. The P-38s and the P-51s were our fighter planes.
Were there times where you were so close up to some of the Japanese planes that were coming at you? And what did that feel like?
Well, toward the end of the war, I think they realized that Japan was going to lose the war, and then they had started this kamikaze where they would try to fly right into your plane, and it was a one-way trip for them.
Yeah, that is still amazing to me. Like I had mentioned to you, I remember hearing about that when I was a little girl and just thought that was that's harrowing, I think. Did you ever see a kamikaze run into another plane?
Yes, I did. Another plane in our squadron. In fact, I think I saw about three kamikazes take 3 of our bombers down.
You said by the time you were there, the Japanese had established the Philippines as their long-term military base. So that is why you were bombing them, right? Because
Yeah,
they'd taken over.
Philippines, we were, they really had set up a lot of military establishments, or whatever you want to call it, because they were taking over the Philippines, and that was going to be a big situation for them.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite, it was a big part of the Pacific Theater operation with the Philippines. You know, that was one thing in history that stood out to me about that particular area. You also talked to me about Borneo, which is another island nearby. Why was Borneo important to the Japanese?
They had a oil there and a refinery. And so when we took that out, I'm pretty sure this had a big impact because they had the story I heard that they were getting 92% of their fuel from Borneo. And so when we went from Bayok Islands, we went to Clark Field, about 50 miles from Manila, and there was quite a number of Japanese fighters sitting on the ground because they had no fuel.
Mhm. And with the kamikazes in that time frame, you know, and then striking the Borneo, you know, I mean, I think the two together, plus you said Japan was also fighting China as well. That just took a lot of pressure. That was a lot of pressure on them at that
Oh.
time that kind of made the difference that it did with the ending of the war.
Uh, the Japanese were fighting China before we really got involved, I believe.
Now, how did you guys find out about that Borneo and that island and it being an oil and fuel reserve for them?
But one of the bombers from our squadron made a trip over there and almost got shot down because that was so important to the Japanese because they had the oil and the refinery, and that's where they got most of their fuel.